awakening. Have you felt it? You are listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie. Great Grand Rising, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight on Dark Matter Radio, live 365. Tonight, we have a show that was recorded a little while ago, about maybe a week ago, with the great medicine man himself, Black Bear. And his show reminds us of all the things we should have in our medicine bag. Dandelions, etc. On how to take care of ourselves. But tonight, we were discussing current events and going through the lost history of our people, and why it's important for us to remember. Great Grand Rising, have a great time. Talk to you soon. Mahalo.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Going live now. Senhor, Dalgote, Torrijo Sidunela. Los Mames. Okay, welcome to the Black Bear Medicine Bag Show. And with me today, I have A&U Thunder. Thank you, brother, for coming on to the show.
My deepest appreciation. I'm glad to be here, Black Bear.
All right, let's jump in the trending topic. From painting over a Black Lives Matter mural, to temporarily scrubbing web pages, stories of the Navajo code talkers, scholars and activists say the Trump administration is trying to erase non-white history. From painting all over Washington, D.C., Black Lives Matter mural to temporarily... Oh, okay. Fiona Jones says it's hard to see the jackhammers dig up the yellow concrete that she has painted with the words Black Lives Matters. When you're down there, literally hearing and feeling the streets being torn and seeing, like, literally the paint brushes being pushed to the side. 5 years ago, after the killing of George Floyd, Jones was one of the artists who came out to paint in the middle of the night. She said watching the mural removed felt like watching it in an attempt to erase the racial justice movement that arose out of the grief of over George Floyd's killing. It was surreal, if nothing else. Jones says there's always been a feeling of this kind of erasure, but it is supercharged. The Department of Defense, for example, has been scrubbing the websites for images and articles that equate with diversity and equality and inclusion. And a page about the military's career of baseball great like Jackie Robinson was erased and then restored after pushback, as few others have been. A political scientist at the University of Michigan says pages and pictures like Arlington National Cemetery's website are just gone. He says the Pentagon tells the larger story of defense that America, through individuals, tells of heroism. Okay, Don, if you take away any pictures of women, if you take away any pictures of Black heroes, of Asians, of Native Americans, of Latinos, then who else is left? It seems like the message is only that white men belong, he says. And he points out their oration of articles about the Navajo code talkers who used their native language to create an unbreakable code in World War II. The DOD has restored the page, but Zani Gorman, whose father was a code talker, says even temporary erasure feels scary. All right, let's jump into it. What do you think is going on from your perspective?
From my perspective, again, I have to use the perspective of an Aboriginal, Indigenous American Indian. And when you take a look at a lot of the political stuff, you have to really understand we're talking about systematic things that are happening with inside of their system. Now, when I say their system, it's a system upon which we were, how can I say, battled into. So they came and they tried to genocide us off our land within our civilization, and then they created a system for us to be able to join in with them. And in the beginning, they really didn't want us to join in, but the thing is that this is their system. So when they're trying to eradicate or erase history, we as Aboriginal, Indigenous Americans, Americus, and again, you're hearing me saying American Indian and not Native Americans, because in my view, and in the study that we've done, they're two different entities. So we have to make sure that there is an understanding of what is an American Indian, an original American Indian, and then a Native American, and what those terms really mean. So when Trump or the Trump administration or this system, it appears or tries to make it appear that they're eradicating history, you have to say, okay, what history are they really eradicating? Because they eradicated the American Indian history, and as of right now, nobody's even talking about it. I mean, they got people running around here calling themselves black, African Americans, Negroes, mulattoes, all different types of things. And when you take a look at who we are as beings of people, none of those things apply to the original American Indian. Then you got people running around here calling themselves Native Americans. And in the history of Native Americans, they hit that whole entire thing. People really don't understand what a real Native American is. Native Americans is actually really a term that applies to the European or other races that came from outside of the Americas that now reside here that call themselves Native Americans. So they first applied to the Europeans. We are the copper-colored beings that they found here, and then they coined the term Native Americans for themselves to begin the erasure of our real history. So when they start talking about, they tore up Black Lives Matter, they tore up the streets, the Navajo, we'll get into the Navajo thing in just a second, but when you get into the Black Lives Matter situation, it doesn't even really apply to our being of people because we're not black. We're copper-colored beings that they found here, that they gave us a name of Negro, black, and then that newest term, African American. So when we talk about history, we talk about what is our real history. What history are they really trying to get you not to look at? I had a conversation with a guy in Florida not too long ago. I lived in Florida for about maybe 5 years, and did a lot of interesting things down there. And they were talking about how DeSantis was trying to get rid of black education, get rid of black studies. And I said, well, what does black studies teach you? And they say they teach us about slavery. They teach us about the Civil War. So I said, well, when you say slavery, who are you actually really referring to as the slaves? And they said black African Americans. Well, in our true history, when we get down to how many Africans actually made it into the quote unquote colonies of the what you now call the United States, it was less than 500,000 people in a 500-year period, right?
I got a question real quick
Yep.
because not everybody is American Indian by far. Not everybody is Aboriginal. And not everybody is from Africa, right? And what I find is when I did the DNA test, looks like there's an admixture of African, an admixture of American Indian, admixture of European for all of us as a whole. Nowadays, like people say I'm this, I'm that, until you really do a specific study, a deep study, not just ancestry, a lot of it, and you compare it to what the notes are, what's written down. I think that you get to see in a depth like that, hey, we're all mixed here. So it when you see that, and it makes you see it differently than just to say, I'm this, I'm that. I mean, you could go off of skin tone, but when you start to trace people thousands and thousands and thousands of years back to that most ancient people, everybody came from somewhere else. Nobody just popped out of this ground. Because even if we go by it from the story, how did we get here? Everybody traveled to this part of the world.
Well,
Somewhere else.
or did they? Because when you talk about when we get into DNA and we get into DNA studies, DNA results, a lot of these ancestry DNA things, we have to remember that there is a whole swath of DNA that they're not even testing, and that's most of the DNA that is in North America. So they don't test our DNA against the original beings that were here. They test our DNA against the people who just arrived here. And then what happens is that you have to understand that most of these DNA tests, if it's not done in a research facility or something like that, they say it's just entertainment only. And
right, I do see that. Like for example, with me, since my mother's Mexican indigenous, and I know that, and that compares, and I see that unlike a lot of black people, you get 1%. So for my black side, I got from American Indian, got 1%. I'm like, I already knew I was gonna have 1%, but I have a great grandmother that's on the DOS roll, so I know that that's not real because then it should be more. Like if she's full, my grandmother would be half, which and my dad would be a quarter, and I should have 1/8 percentages on there. But I know that that's not correct to what they're showing, and that's what ancestry hides. So that's why you need a deeper test.
No signal.
And like you said, research. Yeah, we need to go to a research laboratory. But I ask every Native person this, every Aboriginal person, do you carry that DNA in those mounds that you claim to be? Are you from the mounds because you're saying you're from the mound builders? Are you sure because there's thousands of other Native groups that came here? Would you just want to say mound, or would you want to say the original people? Like the mother of my children, she is Eastern Band Cherokee from the Eastern Band Baker Rose. On top of that, a deeper test showed that she's Eastern Band and also Alabama Cherokee that we didn't have nothing to know about. And then they also something we were trying to, from her document set, showed that she was just from Mississippi. But then her deeper DNA analysis showed that she's both Mississippi and Oklahoma Choctaw. So it's like, these deeper, better tests will show in depth where your ancestors are. And then she has the older ones, the Kinuit ones that's in America. That not that many people have Kinuit. And that's way over there in Oregon. And then she, you know what I'm saying? So certain black folks or melanated copper have the older bones in North America. Not everybody will carry that, but some people will. Some people won't. So it's every individual person, I feel like, is going to be a variation. And people carry things from Africa because when they bring them over, people, I won't say that the number survived, but I say the number multiplied, the intermixture of the people who were already here. That would make sense.
No, that's
number. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. And
right.
and we do have to remember though that there were very few people from Africa that actually came over here into what we now call the United States. Very few people, and that what we now call the slave trade, was actually happening. It was actually the North Carolinian slave trade that was going all the way up from Long Island, New York, all the way down into the Caribbean, and then around. But we also have to remember that the people that they went that supposed person that they call Columbus when he came here. When you read his diaries, he tells you exactly who was here. He tells you exactly who he met, what they look like, and then and exactly what he thought about them. And he also, when you read his diaries, you find that there was no mistaking as to who and what he was looking for, and who they plan on conquering. And you know, again, when we talk about the admixture, yes, there was admixtures of a lot of our people, from people coming from all over, but we have to remember that we are a distinct people that were here in the United States, and from my research, from my studies, we are a people separate until every other species on the planet. They created this word race to add them into the admixture of our species. And when you begin to start really taking a look where a lot of these different species come from, you begin to start understanding that a lot of these people were created, and some of them were created not too long ago. Right?
Or when you say created, you mean out of a laboratory, or you mean procreated? Or like, break that down for people, for my audience.
All right. So when I say created, like most people haven't heard of I'll use the term tamahu, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the word tamahu comes out of the out of SETI one, Kemet SETI one, and it was exposed by Champollion the Younger. And we know this because he is writing letters to Champollion the Elder about what he had found. And this was in about 1830, 1840s, 1830s. And there's a lot of interesting things that began to happen around that particular time, right? A lot of buildings started being founded here in the Americas, right? Buildings that were already here. Now, that's why when we get back to talking about erasing our history, we have to begin to start understanding that our history and our being of people was not just a tribe, which is a newly created word, and started to be used about 1630 to 1650. The same time they came up with that word or that designation or that classification called white. Right?
Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Like my mom's people are Yoeme, which is the Ant people are Yaqui. We're also Indea, which is Apache. And we're also Ania, Huya, principal people, Cherokee. We always had names for ourselves before the idea of a whole group. And we also had family ties and clans before the European. The tribe, to me, and like all of this is under the federal government. That's what they created. So people who listen to them and you get this amount of stuff, the ones who didn't were hostile or stuff like that. Yeah, I find that, to me, it's just wordplay. A lot of this is just wordplay to cause division among people. And this is what I find when I go among Native people on reses. They say, who's your mother? Who's your father? Because they're trying to find the connection. Are you our kinfolk or you're not our kinfolk a lot of times? And I think that that's what people have to go and learn is who's your family? How are you connected to this land? And how you connected as a group? Because that's how most people around the world moved as groups. I don't care if it's in America or it's in Australia or New Papua New Guinea or Africa. It's always been about your father and your mother and your family ties to the land.
understandable that as well. But we do have to understand that, when they began to start really erasing our real history, they began to start renaming us. So when you take a look at a map, you'll see a real a map of the what they would consider the old world, or Paleo America, whatever the situation is. You'll see thousands of names everywhere, especially around rivers, lakes, around the ocean. Thousands of names. So in a European mindset, they say these are all tribes. So we take a look at a modern day map. You take a look at a modern day map and you say, oh, somebody lives in Queens, New York, or somebody lives in Baltimore, Maryland, or somebody lives in Miami, Florida. You don't say that those are tribes. You say those are cities, towns. You say those are states. And this is a way, again, of erasing who we are as beings of people. When they get into saying Mississippians, right? You get into saying Mississippians, people, what they don't tell you is that the Mississippians are also related to the Zai, or what they call Olmecs. They don't let you know that the Mayans, what they call the Mayans, the Maya, they were civilized all throughout the lower part of what we now call the United States, going into Florida. They don't let you know about our civilization, right? And what they, quote unquote, founded here. And the war that took place to make us prisoners of war, to work in free work camps of what we actually really owned. So we have to be very careful. And then they began to start renaming everything. Renaming everything after their kinfolk. Even the Cherokee language, right? I mean, I'm Iroquois. Now, as soon as somebody comes and tells me that they're Iroquois, tells me automatically they're not Haudenosaunee. They're not really Mohican. They're not really anything that is really of Aboriginal, indigenous, and ancestry. They're of a created band of people that was moved in to take the place of the Aboriginal beings that were here. And I'm using the word Aboriginal because mainly people could understand Aboriginals were or people with what you would call nine ether hair, people with curly hair, right? Cosmic hair, copper-colored beings, right? Those are the people that they came to replace. So when you say we have to understand what it is about family, our relation to family, we have to make sure that we understand that, who we are as beings of people, because when they made the mistake of testing our genetics, right? So they were trying to prove, when I say the geneticists, the European geneticists found that the majority, they had upwards to anywhere from 10 to 35% Neanderthal genes, as well as other things, in their DNA. Mm-hmm. Right? So they weren't completely, quote unquote, what they call humans. Well, I don't believe that we're humans either, but we can get to that. That's another hidden aspect of our history that they're trying to get us to look somewhere else as our history, and not what we really are as beings of people. So what they did, they made a mistake to make it short. They tested, quote unquote, an African American, which they never did before, in any of their real geno studies, because their geno studies actually happens at melanin conferences that we have none of our leadership has ever been invited to. It's only for them, right?
Yeah, I have actually saw, speaking of that, it's crazy because they show an African American group from the Americas. Like they try to put it like your admixtures are from Africa, but then they have to show that you're from America. And it's like, I'm from all of the Southeast. So, and I understand, my father told me this too, that they erased a lot of native people, made them African.
That's right. And what they found out here in this DNA test that they did, right? What they found out, like you said, you got to go deep, right? So they go deep into the hopple groups and stuff like that. What
Right.
they found out is that the African American, the quote unquote African American, had a genome or a DNA, and this is in the male, not the female. The male doesn't go as deep as the female. It's the male. Was 340,000 years older than their nearest competitor. It was so old that they had to put the African American people on a totally different polygenic tree.
Yeah, we are. Like genetically, we're different from the Africans because like they'll show us we're related, but not show us how we're related to these Africans. Like for example, on my mom's side, I have to use me for example. There's a whole bunch of Mexican people that I'm related to in the Southwest because of the intermixture in between Mexico and Arizona. The native people I'm related, but when I see the African American, the only one I'm related to is other African Americans. I'm not related to old Banji or Adabanche or none of the Africans. But if only other African Americans in America I'm related to. I'm like, what's up with that? How come we're not related to Africans?
Well, you got to remember something. When was the first time you met an African American? I want you to think about that.
Jesse Jackson. You know what's the funny thing is Jesse Jackson is from the Western or the Cherokee Nation registered, I think, and he created African Americans in 1986 or something like that. Isn't that right?
That is correct. You're on it. So the first time that you met an African American had to be sometime after 1986, 1987, 1988, 1990. That was the first time.
That movie came out. Then with Eddie Murphy, remember Coming to America in that age? I was a kid when that came out. Little kid.
Yep.
It tried to, and there were so many black people that thought that that's who their people are. You know what I'm saying? To the utmost. Now, since I seen that, I really question if there are black people in New Papua New Guinea that's not genetically related to Africans, if they're not genetically related even to the other people in Australia, there's several blackness in this world that's not all related to Africa. Even in the Bible, it said it made everybody spread out throughout the earth and didn't settle on Africa. It really makes you think like, okay.
Yeah, so now when you get to, so we're getting to, how can I say, you got to remember something. The reason why I really hop on our past history is because we're not African Americans, we're not black, we're copper-colored beings. You can say that we're Aboriginal American Indians. You know, even indigenous. The word indigenous in Canada means for a quote unquote black person. The word indigenous in Canada means someone who has been here longer than newer Africans. So because you are here longer than the new migrants of Africa, you're indigenous to America. Right? So you got to be careful of a lot of these different terms that we use, because a lot of these different terms do exactly what they're doing right now, is they're trying to hide the history of who you really are as beings of people. Now, when you talk about Mexico, Aboriginal, indigenous Mexicans, we know that over the past few months that Mexico has actually acknowledged that the indigenous population are original to the land. Now, that original population of indigenous Mexicans are again, remember, there was no borders, have a lot of original, what we now call Americans, in that population as well. And
yeah, like when I looked at my mom's DNA, there was like 3%. You know, they try to label that as African. Nah, that's black people from the U.S. who couldn't get to Canada. A lot of black people didn't go per se to Canada. They went to Mexico because it makes more sense if you're in Texas or or anywhere and that was in slavery, why would you go to Canada? It's easier to get to Mexico than
Well,
it is to get to
yep. So
Canada.
remember, there's a heavy copper-colored Aboriginal presence in Canada as well, right?
Yeah,
So
it's over there in what is it that Nova Scotia. I actually know some. I have a good friend who's Micmac, Black, and Cree, and she talks about that mixture that came up there under the British, because the British were using Black folks against the Americans, and they promised their freedom, but the freedom was way up there in Canada, where it's super cold.
that's
Nova
right. But
Scotia.
now, when you mention British, you mention Europeans, and when they first began to start coming over here, which was probably earlier than 1492, you got to remember who was in charge, who was in control, and who was what. Because the original slaves were not the Aboriginal people who were actually prisoners of war. See, we were prisoners of war, forced to work on the farms to feed them, because they didn't know how to work the farms. They didn't know anything about agriculture right?
One last thing, when you mentioned that, I could not stop. But the mother of my children, one of her ancestors, who's from New England, for example, on the East Coast, among the Wampanoag, she was I think she's Wampanoag or Pequot, and she was literally a native slave. And these are the melanated natives that were forced to work for the Pilgrims and do that type of stuff. So I had to add that in. So it's like some of these people that you just mentioned were some of the people that the Wampanoag, the Narragansetts, the Pequot, some of them were these very ones that were forced to work to keep the Pilgrims alive.
And in my view, how I look at things now, we were and are still today prisoners of war. Prisoners of war. The Civil War is not what you exactly thought it was. It was part of a worldwide war that went on for quite some time, but that's a whole other story. But we are prisoners of war. We were forced to work. The slaves, the original slaves, or the slaves, were the ones they brought with them, and they were the Tamahu. Who brought the Tamahu was the black kingships of Europe. So the black kingships of Europe went all the way until the 1800s. And again, some of the black kingships of Europe, and they call it Tartaria, are Aboriginal, original, indigenous Americans. They're us. See, this is what they're truly hiding. That's why every time Putin says, I'm going to release something, they get bent out of shape, because they don't want the world to remember. They don't want us to remember who we are. Because we are the ones that built the cathedrals. They were energy centers, sound centers, healing centers. We were the ones that built all the bells as a protection agency, vibration. We were the ones who had airships. We were the ones. We traveled through air all around the planet. This is our technology. And there's nothing, as they say, there's nothing new under the sun unless it has been forgotten, right? All of the technology that they have was already here, and we had developed it all. This is the reason why when you find all of these people that are inventors, that invented a lot of these things, they were Aboriginal people. But what were they really inventing, or were they just remembering the things that were already here? Were they already developing the things that were already here, right? Because you know that there were already jet planes. They had electric bicycles, motorcycles, electric cars. They had batteries. Lights were everywhere. And we had free energy generators and we had, again, I even seen a street in, I forgot where that street was. It was in Russia. It was somewhere in Russia, and they had these metal that they had a lot of times they forget that they had this stuff underneath. So they dug up the road, and what they found underneath the road was a lot of these metal rings. A lot of these metal rings all over the road. So the road was already there. And these metal rings were about maybe, I would say, anywhere from 5 to 8 inches thick. And there were thousands of them, which means that they had to be produced in mass. So our history that they try to get us not to remember is the real history that we must remember. And that's why I say, so when we talk about, who brought certain races of people here, it was a black kingship. Some people might call them the Moors. Some people might call them, Hebrews or whatever the situation is, but they were a black kingship. Thoth had described some of these people as the black-headed ones, again, and they were created people, right? So a lot of these people that came over here and did what they did was soulless. And that's why I say it's extremely important for us to remember who we are as beings of people, because within your very genetics is carbon. And it's the type of carbon that is able to hold something so precious that almost 80% of the population of the planet is unable to hold. And that is a soul. So a lot of the times when they say, well, they hate me because I'm black, or they hate me because I'm African American, or they hate me because I got dark skin. Well, you got to think about that. Why do they really hate you? Because there's a lot of Indians that have dark skin that they don't treat the same. There's a lot of Africans out there that have dark skin that they don't treat the same. There's a lot of other nationalities and races that have darker skin than you, and some of the other people, they don't treat them the same way they treat you. And
I think that, hold up there.
Yeah.
I think this. They played the darker skinned people against each other because at the end of the day, they're afraid of all melanated people because they know that they will, if they all got together, we would be stronger than them. Yeah, I've just found out there is 13 million new Papua Guineas. Imagine if all blacks around the world, melanated people, got together against them and said they did this to all of us.
Yeah.
We'd be done with them.
And
I believe that's what it is that they play us against each other. Just like in Wakanda, how in part one, how the Black American was saying, look, if I combine all melanated people that are and liberate us against the white oppressors, we won't have to deal with this stuff. And Tagala was against it because he said we only deal with our own problems. Divide and conquer is what they're doing.
So, and that's it. So, as I finish my other thought, the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is because even though they may look like you, they are not of you. Because a lot of these people that came over here look just like you, and that's how they were able to infiltrate our society. And these soulless beings who were jealous, angry, and upset, because remember, every other being of people on this planet looked for quote-unquote God on the outside of them. We were the only being of people on the planet that said that we had God within. Indigo people. So when you talk about people who are on this planet with calcified pineal glands, they have no connection to a soulful self. They may have avatars, and that's why I say you have to be cautious of who you're aligning yourself with, because a lot of the energy that they're aligned with are not aligned with the energy that you have. And the soulful way, you're way up here. And those who are unable to carry a soul because of the properties within inside of their being, of their being, are much lower, you know. And again, you know, that whole entire thing about worldwide unity and this, that, and the other thing. You got to remember, the whole entire world was against our population. Every single being of people was basically came against us. And they did everything that they could do worldwide to destroy everything about us. Right? So, you know, when you read like Diop, and he talks about, he does talk about the Tamahu, but he talks about how they play a mind game and trying to get you to think that you are, or they are, just like you are. It doesn't matter of the color. They said that a white person could be black, a black person could be white, but yet they don't treat us the same. So, you know, and we have to be careful in our indigenous or aboriginal or original being on the energies that we connect to. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, is this guy racist? What is he talking about? This, that, or the other thing? What is he talking about? I'm just telling you that you have properties within inside of your being that no one else on the planet has. All right, and you can't get around that. Right? This is the reason why they need your blood. This is the reason why your skin, just your skin, per gram, is worth more than gold. Your skin on your body, just your skin, is worth over $35 million. Just your skin. There's no other being of people on the planet whose skin is worth that much money. Right? They use your neurons, right? They use your neurons to make quantum computers because you're a quantum entity. Right? So we're powerful. But because they have stripped us of the knowledge of self and got us living in a dream state, we now have forgotten our history and forgotten the power and who we are and what we're supposed to be. And this is the reason why those of us who are still able to carry souls, which we have, are so important, because we are the only creation beings on the planet. They have to use us, our energy, to create their reality.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying? So I'm not against any other race of people. I'm not against what you call white people, which burn from the Tamahu. I'm not against other variations of what you call black or whatever they are, because they too have been created and are different variations of the Tamahu. A lot of these are created beings that aren't able to hold or possess what we have. So that's why when you look at the Adam in the Bible, that story is not about us, it's about them.
Gotcha.
Right? That's their creation. How we were created was totally different. Right? And in a different frame of time. We were created what they call in the chaos period, right? And this was the beginning of a lot of stuff that was going on there, but that's a whole nother ball game. But and they were created by entities that came here that knew that they were not supposed to create another being. And when they created that being, which were black, they were the original black people, they created a whole bunch of other beings. And then a renegade priesthood created a whole separate being called the Tamu. And how do we know this? We know this from the Nag Hammadi writings from Kemet and what they showed on the wall about how a group of renegade priesthood created a race of beings they wish they never created.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm about to jump into the black bear medicine bag. The whole reason I got started, and it starts with dandelion root. Dandelion root has a long history of using traditional medicine, particularly for supporting liver health, aiding digestion, and acting as a natural diuretic. It is also known for potentially boosting the immune system, for protection skin, and even have some health benefits in managing diabetes and weight loss. Okay. Dandelion root is highly regarded for its abilities to support liver and kidney functions. It is thought to help detoxify the liver and gallbladder and promote healthy kidney functions. And this is usually diuretic property, which flushes out excesses of waters and tonic from the body. Some researchers suggest that it could even protect against liver cancer. All right, and the next one is going to be wild onion. Wild onion has had a history of medical use in traditional medicine remedies for particular respiratory issues, fever, and external injuries. It is also known for insect repellent and possibly benefits for blood pressure and blood sugar regulations. And here is detail. Um, Wild onion can be, or syrup can be used for coughs, colds, bronchitis, and even pneumonia. External wounds, stings. Basically, you could use it for insect bite stings and on wounds, basically. And this is all that I have. You guys could check out more things about medicinal things on the Blackbird Medicine Bag page. Before we jump into the next trending topic, I want you to finish your thoughts about the soulful people that's being erased.
Yeah, so just by what you were talking about. Now, again, when we talk about erasing our history, what you just came about with dandelions and the onion root, these are things that they helped us to forget. And anybody that's listening, this is probably one of the most powerful radio programs that you can ever listen to because it actually brings you back to the root. Because everything that you see in your yard that they call a weed is something is medicine that will be able to handle just about everything that they put inside of you. And I say they put inside of you because when you go to a grocery store, they don't grow anything in there. It's most of the stuff in there is all synthetic, and they get you thinking that that's food. And what Black Bear was talking to you is about what they try to force us to forget about our natural ways of living off the land. So I tell you, right now my heart is like swollen in terms of just joy because these are things that kind of just grow out of our soul in order to be able to put out there so people can have an understanding of what they are forgetting and to give them a mind to remember of who and what they are as beings of people.
Yep. That's what I kind of tried to do is because people have came to me. This one Anishinaabe Ojibwe woman said, "Your name's Blackbeard. Do you have any medicine to heal me? I got cancer." I'm like, wow, why would she come to me? I didn't understand that when you have a title like a bear, something powerful, you have to be a healer. And from that point on, I told myself I got to learn about this medicine. And I come to find out on my mom's side, one of her indigenous grandfathers, who was Yaqui, he knew all kind of different medicine, healing things. I'm like, man, like I wish I would have had that knowledge. But I guess by picking up books and learning and having these shows and talking to indigenous people along around the world within, but I kind of focus on United States because that's where I'm at. I can't go to China because what works in China may not work for me. I got to get stuff in my environment, and that's what I remind people. Yeah, things may work, but what's in your environment is going to work better for you. What's outside is going to work better for your DNA than anything else.
What?
So yeah, that's where I got it from. So let's jump into trendy topic. The next one. Two citizens of the Blackfeet Nation on April 4 filed a lawsuit against the federal government, alleging that the tariffs the Trump administration is imposing on Canada violates the U.S. Constitution, tribal treaties, rights. State Senator Susan Webb E. Browning and Jonathan St. Godfrey, a rancher of the Blackfeet Reservation, named the United States Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and United States of America in this lawsuit, which was filed in the Montana Federal District Court. The plaintiffs are represented by Monica Tarnell, who was a Democrat from Montana's Western Congressional seat in 2022 and 2024. All right, and if you guys want to check out the download of the lawsuit, it's on there. The file one day, thousands of people participated in a nationwide protest against the Trump administration. It's the latest example of tribals flexing their sovereign status to oppose new federal policy. It is one of the several challenges related to President Trump's recent tariff order. The lawsuit specifically pertained that expanded an emergency declaration the flow of illicit drugs across the U.S. border, and one announced on April 2nd that announced that the Glover reciprocal tariffs. The lawsuit is also regarded on the 2nd, February 10, proclaimed that the imposed tariffs steal aluminum and products. Plaintiffs allege that the orders violate the U.S. Constitution, which gives the Congress, not the president, the power to regulate commerce. Trump declared several national emergency due to the U.S. trade deficit and the flow of illicit drug over the northern border, which invokes International Emergency Economic Power Act to issue tariffs, but not to the Blackfeet Nation. Citizens said that the president has no legal basis to do so, or arguing the EEP status does not include the power to tariff. All right, you guys could go on my page and read more about this, but let's discuss it in the J Treaty. Go ahead, ANU Thunder. What do you think is going on?
So one of the things, I mean, they do have the J Treaty. I think the J Treaty goes back to the 1700s or something like that with the British. You got to remember something now. The United States is over $40 trillion in debt. They have probably more than $100 trillion in promised debt. And there's absolutely no way for them or anyone else to help them pay off the debt. So what they're doing right now, is they're doing a realignment from this New World Order program that they announced back in 1990. So what they're trying to do now is bring back the power base to what they call the West, right? So white males like to have the power base back in the West. Now, most European countries, including Canada, would like for them to go along with a global agenda, not a nationalistic agenda, and stay the course and making sure that all production and everything else like that goes to the East. One of the things that I do agree with with the Native Americans in terms of the Jay Treaty is that they're getting caught up in two ways. One, they're getting caught up with the terrorists because when they're allowed to go back and forth from Canada, Mexico, whatever. They're allowed to go back and forth and that have, with the tribal identification, and they're able to do commerce and trade and everything like that. So now what happens is that if a Native American on his tribal land goes across the border, which there really shouldn't be a border, if they go across the border to Canada, they now have to pay a tax. They now have to pay that surcharge that Trump has put on Canada. So,
right, so like parts and stuff, whatever they buy in the United States, if they're going to Canada, they have to pay for that tariff, whatever they buy in the United States.
Yeah.
Or if they buy in Canada, they got to pay it. So either way, you have to pay that.
Correct. Now for them, they should be exempt, right? They should be exempt. Right. And again, this gets into us as beings of people. Because again, we, per se, are not Native Americans. We're a different classification of being of people. And this is the reason why they treat you and give you the treatment that they give you. And we know this because during the ending of World War II, what happened when they were changing over they were changing to the United Nations from I forgot the name of the other thing that they had before the United Nations. But when they were changing over, what they did is that they canceled every individual Aboriginal state, not Native American state, but every original Aboriginal state that had its own dealings in the UN. The United States said they no longer have that ability to do that because they're under our jurisdiction. So what they did to us as beings of people, they totally canceled us out of any kind of power that we had for sovereignty rights. Right? Any kind of power of sovereignty rights. So this is the reason why, they generally do not respect a lot of these treaties made by, quote unquote, Native Americans or Native American type chiefs, because they weren't the Aboriginal Americans that were in charge or supposed to have been in charge of the quote unquote state, which now they call tribes or nations. And how do we know that? We know that because when all of this land was being quote unquote sold to the quote unquote United States or the Union or whatever you want to call it, every single one of these chiefs that did a deal with these people were tracked down and killed. Why? Because they assumed the quote unquote avatar of a chief over an Aboriginal nation and gave up their sovereignty. It is within the Ganashagawa that we are not to give up our sovereignty for any reason whatsoever, and we're not supposed to participate in any of their elections. If we do, we give up our sovereignty. So we need to understand what all of this is all about and why certain people being treated like they're being treated. Don't forget, early on in this process of deportation, they started going after a lot of these Native Americans. And they were threatening. They were threatening.
They said that they did not have any, they weren't birthright citizens because in 1924 is when they were granted this.
That's right.
And so they were being petty. They used any inch they could do.
Well,
so, but where are you going to deport them to? Back to the rest?
No. You got to understand something, right? Though again, this is forgotten history. And this is history that they don't want you to know because they are not indigenous to the United States. They're indigenous to another part of the world, and they were brought here and given the privileges that they're given to from the country that gave them privileges.
Let me ask you something. If the Navajo Nation, right, the Dene in particular, those were the ones that that's the largest nation, and they have lived in Arizona before the United States existed. I mean, the Navajo got the name from the Spaniards, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, how are they not original if they were here when the Spanish got here?
Because most of what you call Native Americans today, and again, I would employ everyone to go get this book called "Don't Call My Dummy No Dummy." Get that book. In that book, it does explain where these new Native Americans came from.
I understand a lot of people be trying to say they come from China and all of that, but if that was the case, though, and this is where I have problems with, is they had a whole language, they have a whole culture surviving out there for long periods of time, and they know that land before even when these other immigrants came here. They couldn't just, in between now until then, they have maintained that land. So for people to say that, I don't know, like my understanding, my stance is that Trump is just trying to get rid of everybody because he don't want nobody that's not a white male to have anything in the United States, period.
Well, listen to what he's saying. Now, I don't support Trump. My politics is the right of return. I believe we need to return to the system upon which we came from before they came. All right, that's my politics. That's where I'm from. People say, "Oh, you're a Trump supporter." No, I'm not a Trump supporter. Trump supporting his own stuff. This is a system that doesn't want us included in it. Period. End of story. And we shouldn't be in that system. We should be in our own system. The system that actually really did right for us. So what's happening is that when he started saying about birthright, right? The birthright, and you got to really read, birthright citizenship was only for those that were Aboriginal to the United States in quote-unquote prisonership of war or slavery. It was only for a certain particular people, not for everyone. That's birthright. So you had to be an Aboriginal American Indian, not a Native American, because Native Americans are people that were from Europe. Those were the original Native Americans. The original Native Americans gave up that Native American title and assumed the title of white and gave the Native American title to the people they're calling Native Americans now, who are also looking more like them than they are like the original people that they found here of the copper-colored beings, right? So there's a lot of changing stuff going on. So we can't get mixed up. So when he starts talking about they don't have a birthright, well, they don't, because they just got here. Somebody brought them here. They just got here. And so,
like I go back to this. How can somebody that just got here, that has their ancestors' bones and a culture before the English or the Spanish or any of these Europeans, how can they just got here if they got their bones and their ancestors in their backyard?
So what they did was a big giant switch flop. Again, remember what they did to the American Indians. They went from American Indians, then they went to Negro, then they went to black, back to Negro, then they went to Afro-Americans, right? And so we had a lot of the Afro-Americans or Afrocentric people around the Americas identifying with that because they are all original Americans, right? Not South Americans, not North Americans, not Central Americans, but Americans, right? Because there's only one America. There's not North or South. It's America, right? So we had a lot of people identifying with that when it came down, because that's again, we have 9 ether hair, right? So we can identify with that. That woke up too many people, so they began to start separating them again by calling them all kinds of different Puerto Ricans, this, that, and the other thing. And then you went to African Americans. We're the only being of people on the planet that had so many different designations that we know of. Because when we begin to start really looking into it, you ask, I've been asking these questions for a long time. My grandmother, she said, you're a different type of Cherokee. You're a different type of Cherokee.
But I noticed this, like, everybody's intermixed now. At this point, they mix with us, we mix with them. We're one now. At this point in time, even we're mixed in with the Europeans. That's the crazy part about it. Like, if you look, the English, we had to have them. We have some of the Irish mixed in with us at this point. So it's almost like, I don't know, like...
Well, who are the Irish?
Yeah,
who are the real Irish, right? We need to know, when you begin to start really studying about all of these different demographics, we need to know who they really are. Because a lot of these people, just like a lot of these quote-unquote slaves that came to the United States, were recycled Americans. Recycled Americans. Because the first people that was taken from any land was our people, and they were taken over into Europe.
That's what Columbus, right, when he started to take all the indigenous populations, because it wasn't gold that he found. He didn't find that much gold, so he started to ship back slaves back there. And I understand that the Moors were a black group of people too, from North Africa, the Berbers. And in fact, I'm going to tell the story that I got now. I was at this Native American trade at the Idle George Museum every year, and a Hopi pulled me to the side, or we started talking to a Hopi, and Hopi said, there was a black man that came to the Zuni people. He was very powerful, and he could sing and he could dance and all of that. And he kept looking for gold, and he kept growing in numbers, and he had multiple wives, and he kept asking for more wives and more priests and more to be his slave. When he got to Cibola, which is the 7 cities of the gold, the Zuni warriors said, do not enter in here. If you enter, we will kill you. He entered in there, and because he looked kind of like a Kachina doll, they honored his spirit. And to this day, in a very cold month, I think it's February or maybe December, it's the winter solstice. They honor his spirit, and he's a Kachina doll. And I wish I could pull that up, just to show you how powerful black folks are among the native people. They regard them very high, I guess, as far as that individual, because he looked like them.
Well,
this was the story I was told.
Yeah, what I like to do is just remind people that a lot of the laws that they have on the books were laws that were created not by our people, but by other people who they designated as our leaders and put in places. And the reason why they don't respect these people is because of what they've done to deserve the type of respect that they have. So they don't respect that because they don't really, how can I say, when you have somebody who falsified who they are, they don't feel as though they need to uphold anything that they've done. Because these people turned on the very people that they're supposed to be representing. Just like Jesse Jackson. And again, a lot of these people may look like you, but they are not you. A lot of these people are soulless beings that are here to make sure you stay subjugated. And even today, you keep on saying, we're a mixed people. And because we're mixed people, it's even more important to understand to question everything, question thoughts that you have in your mind, and to make sure that your thoughts are original. Because 90% of the people don't have original thoughts. It's all programmed. So they're not speaking from their soul. They're speaking from a programmed mind that was given to them from the system.
Gotcha.
right? So that's the only thing that I'm saying. That's why I said, like, when it comes to your program and when you're doing all the medicine stuff and you're talking about the plants, the flowers, the herbs, these are the things that are real, and they're not synthetic. They're not AI.
Right.
This is real. All right. Now the things that you're eating in the stores, you go to Burger King, you go to all these different burger joints, or KFC and all that other type stuff. They got they got 40, 60 different types of ingredients in them that are not real. So there was a lot of people that were representing us that were not real. That's all I'm saying. So I'm just saying, we can identify with a lot. Now you got to remember, because you have a soul, our thing is peace, love, caring. We want to put that out in the world, and that's the vibration we need to be putting out. The sun reprograms us. Our hair soaks it in. We generate electricity. We generate energy, right? That's who we are as beings of people. We want to see the best in all people, but I think that's one of the things that got us in trouble, because we were just out here living. Remember, there was a moratorium for them coming over here for years. Carthage, which was a Carthage, which was a city, or under the jurisdiction of Kemet, had put in a moratorium for anybody on that side of the pond to come over here. They had to be escorted. So for millennia, if they even existed, all right, because you got to remember, certain people with certain types of skin didn't exist until here recently. They weren't on the planet. Most of the people that you're speaking to now that are in all these different high places, even in politics, the president, most of these people had parents that were incubator babies, cabbage patch babies.
To say, were they made out of incubate, or were they laboratory, or they just? That's what. How did they get here on the planet in the past 50 years?
Well,
that's what I'm trying to get out.
So a lot of things began to happen in the 1830s.
1830.
Okay. We'll probably have to have a whole nother program to discuss this. But remember, in the 1830s, this is when they began to start bringing in a new population, a real new population, right? Remember what Franklin said. Benjamin Franklin said, he says that, why do we want to keep on bringing in Germans, Britons, the Irish, the French, the Russians? Why do we want to bring in all of these swarthy people and dilute what we got going on here? Because there's not many of us. This was just before the 1800s. There's not many of us. So there's not many of them on the planet. So where did they come from? Where did they come from? And they weren't dealing with these, what you now call Native Americans. They weren't dealing with them. Right? The closest thing to a Native American that they had is the Filipinos that they brought in here in the 1600s. Right? That's when they arrived in here. Other than that, they were dealing with a copper-colored based system that they were commissioned to destroy. And who brought them here? A dark race people brought the Tamahu over here. They didn't create any of the things that's going on now. They were supporting. They were supporting caste. Right? That's why they were bringing over the Slavics or the white slaves. They were the actual slaves, and they called their masters, their dark masters, they called them gods, because it was their forefathers whom created them.
And this goes back to the thing that R. Kelly got in trouble for. Remember, where the white people made it illegal to have white slaves or something like that he got in trouble. I'm trying to think of what that's called. the act of where they had Eastern European Slavic women that were prostitution or something like that was in that realm, and then they didn't like that, and so they made it illegal to have any type of women going across state lines, and this is all coming together.
Yeah,
You know what I'm talking about?
I believe so, because what happened is that there were more what you would call black slave owners than there were white slave owners. And when they began to start kicking them off the land, and this is where you get the Trail of Tears. This was in the 1830s. Remember this now.
Okay, it's because I always heard Cherokee upper class, the mixed blood whites. According to written history, they say the mixed blood whites, half white, half Cherokees, were owned slaves, or the full blood Cherokees were owned slaves. Nobody else. The same thing with the Creeks and the Seminoles. It was the upper class, or the mixed bloods, according to written history.
Yeah, you got me on that one. I haven't heard that one, but what I do know is that blacks. Well, we, the Aboriginal American Indian, the actual American Indians of the people that they found here on the land, the one that they were able to subjugate, were prisoners of war. Everybody else they were slaughtering. And I'm telling you, the kind of slaughtering that they were doing is the kind that they cannot say in history. And I was reading this a long time ago. And, again, being ignorant of people hiding history, you don't think they're going to, take it out of the books or, make these books not appear anymore. But they used to show the pictures of what they used to do to the Aboriginal people here in the Americas. And it was on the same level, if not worse, than what they did to a lot of the people that were in the Polynesian islands. Horrible what they did here. They were walking around and they was just come into neighborhoods and just wipe people out. They would take people. They would take the quote unquote swarthy Moors and move them into an area. And if the area wasn't easily subjugated, they would just wipe the people out. So when Jackson came along and he did the Trail of Tears type stuff, he moved our people out west, and that's when they began to start creating all this Black Wall Street stuff. We started building again. And Black Wall Street was created, I think, in 1831.
And Black Wall Street was actually created a little bit after slavery. It was on the eastern part of Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was the land that was the Greenwood section of Tulsa, where it was separated from the white part of Tulsa, and all of that was Creek territory that was leased it out for the city or whatever, and the blacks started just dealing with each other over there, and they got jealous but actually how the real story goes is that there was a reporting that this woman said that somebody raped her, a black guy raped her, and they were guarding him because they knew they would hang him. And then they just started fighting. The whites wanted that black guy, and the blacks wouldn't give up because they wanted him to have a fair trial. And that's how the whole little war began. And the first bomb was dropped on the black city.
Well, that was the first. That was the first bomb to be dropped on the Americas, anywhere on the Americas. And the reason why they did that, and again, there's a second book. I told you, don't call my dummy no dummy. Fully explains the war that went on in the Americas to further wipe us out, our economic viability, right? To further wipe us out. So all these little riots that you hear of, it was actually a war, the continuation of the war, and that continuation, it continues today, but it actually culminated after the Civil Rights Movement into the 70s on the war on drugs. That was also part of the war on us. So I'm only saying all of this just to say, when we talk about our history, let's talk about our history. And people say, well, how do you know? Well, I traveled all over South America. I take a look at what's written on these temple walls. I take a look at the pictures. I look at what they actually look like. Right? And so when I look at a book and I look what's on the temple wall, and if it doesn't match up, who am I going to believe? The book or what's on the temple wall? I've been to Mexico. Down in Mexico and looking at all the Mayan stuff and everything, right? I've been around and I've seen a lot of the stuff up there in Canada. Right?
Did you ever go among the Mi'kmaq people? Because that's who I lived among for like 6 months in 2008 and 10 was the Mi'kmaq people on Quebec area. Are you familiar with?
No, because I was out west. I was in Alberta, BC. I was in Alberta and BC.
Oh, so you must have knew a lot of Blackfeet in that area then.
I believe so that they were there because I was up in between Calgary, Fort McMurray, Edmonton. And then I was in Cranbrook. I forgot the name of the. There was actually this is what's crazy. It's what 2010. I met with a chief. She was a female, and she was actually an Aboriginal Indigenous American Indian chief.
Oh yeah, among the Cree, there's a lot of that's why we try to tell people we intermix with them all the time.
Yeah, I'm just saying. And that was in Canada, where you wouldn't expect to see anything like that.
No, believe it or not, our people are among the Algonquian-speaking tribes. We're heavily among them.
Yep. No. I understand. I'm just saying. So just so that people can understand, when I talk about original Americans, and when you talk about Native Americans, you have to look up the actual word of what the actual definition of a Native American. And I believe that's in the 1828, Yeah, 1828, I believe, Webster Dictionary definition. Right? And that tells you exactly what it's all about in their own words. And, so there's just a lot of stuff. It's just very interesting stuff. It's really good. And, I enjoy seeing our people being who they are and not pretending to be something else other than what they are.
Got you. I do understand that. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to let you go now, sir, because I'm about to get off.
All right. Good deal. Right, well, I just want to, so a New Thunder, 365, live 365, Dark Matter Radio is usually where I'm at. And anytime that you want to talk, I appreciate you and thank you for bringing us back to our medicine roots. Black Bear, one of the greatest things that our people can ever do. I appreciate your wisdom and thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for my watchers. I can't really see who you guys are, but I want to thank the 2 people who did subscribe to this channel, and we were growing, and we are going to keep going forward, and we're going to keep bringing you back as many times as you would like to come back out. And I appreciate your dialogue, and I appreciate my supporters. You guys have a great night. Have a good night. Thank you, sir.
Mahalo.
Donna Doggy, go here until we meet again.